So even from an adult perspective, I thought there were pacing issues. But I have to say, with the costumes and the computer-generated images and effects, I really think they made those CG characters feel like humans, you know?
That is a very you know, important aspect of this particular film and that is its, you know, homage to the original text. The fact that it is, you know, it wants to be its own unique entity, creative work, but at the same time, you know, has a very present sense of, you know, debt, of, you know, if you will, of influence, ownership to the original text. And I think the issue with pacing might kind of come from that. You know, the fact that so much of the, you know, the film as text had to be, you know, constructed around, you know, the original.
That's a good point.
And then even I mean, I agree with you completely. The CG characters, I mean, they managed to make these cartoon drawings come to life,
right.
You know, to exist in, you know, a three-dimensional plane, and you know, seem as if though they were organic creatures that actually live somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that part of the credit for that has to go to the actors that voiced the characters. Because in particular, I thought James Gandolfini,
very interesting choice,
as the character of Carol. I thought I completely believed that, and I thought it was almost an alternate, more sensitive version of Tony Soprano in a way, which is the way that I was thinking as I watched it. Because here's a man that, or here's a character that knows what the right thing to do is, but he's got this other part of his nature that struggles against it. And watching him work that out, even as a character, I thought, even as a non-human character, I thought was very powerful, and I think he found exactly the right voice for it and exactly the right tone. And I thought, you know, all the other voice actors did a really great job. And the kid, I thought the kid was good. You
were telling me that you had read somewhere that he was not actually a child actor, that he was a newly discovered talent by Spike Jonze.
I think that they looked at hundreds of kids, and then Spike Jonze had a friend, maybe in Portland or somewhere, that said, well, I know a kid and his name is actually Max, and you should take a look at him. And they sent him the tape or did whatever, and then they brought him in for an audition. And then the question was, would the kid's parents, you know, most child actors have parents that are stage parents.
Right.
That they're pushing those kids and, you know, feeding them pixie sticks to keep them awake, and, you know, toddlers and tiaras kind of thing.
Sure.
But in this case, the parents were really skeptical, or, you know, had a healthy skepticism, and they wanted to make sure it wouldn't negatively affect the kid. So that, I think, is pretty cool on the part of both the director and the parents to make that casting choice that is unorthodox within Hollywood. So,
well, the young actor that played the character of Max, I will definitely, for someone, this being his first project, I was very impressed by his range of emotions that he could express, you know, just through facial cues.
Yeah.
You know, he's a very emotive young actor whose name actually escapes me right now. But I'd be curious to see where his career goes after this, just in terms of, you know, the idea of the genre of the child film and child actors. You know, is this going to be his one and only, or?
I don't know. He might have some other credits before this, but I don't know. I seem to think that nothing high profile, at least.
Right.
And it's the same with There Will Be Blood. That kid had never been in anything. Mm-hmm. And again, there's a kind of realness to it that that you don't always, that you rarely find in Hollywood child performances.
Sure.
So why don't we move on to our second film, which doesn't resemble Where the Wild Things Are in most ways.
No, other than that, our loose segue there of discussing genre.
Exactly, and pacing and length, and
audience
what keeps an audience in the seat, and which audience does it keep in the seat.
So Paranormal Activity. I will go ahead and confess to our audience, and as I've already mentioned to you, that I have not seen this film in its entirety. I've actually seen portions of it through my, constant work in the cinema. And to be perfectly honest with you, it has not captivated me. It has not encouraged me to sit and watch the entire film. So perhaps I'm coming from the, don't watch this, or why did you watch this camp.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the film, Tommy. What am I missing?
Well, I think your experience is interesting because it sort of proves the point that it's not a film for every audience. And it proves the point that even for audience members who do get it, it's still tedious and overdone, overlong. And that's definitely the way I reacted to it. I did sit through the whole thing, and I saw it very early on when it was just playing in a few locations.
Right.
So in a way, I'm glad I did that because then at least it didn't have that amount of hype behind it that it gained over time. So I can't say I was let down because I expected so much. You know, I saw it relatively early on. But even in that case, and it was almost an empty theater too. So there was like maybe 3 other people in there besides me, and I was by myself. And so I also didn't have that energy of a horror movie audience,
right.
which, you know, is another way an audience relates to a film is if you're so inclined, you depend on the energy of the audience for your enjoyment of the film. So for some people, it's scarier if it's a packed theater because you're hearing other people's reactions. And in fact, the marketing of the film, when it was still grassroots marketing, I put that in air quotes because
I would call
it's
it
paramount.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would call it AstroTurf marketing.
AstroTurf
it has a
marketing all the way, yeah.
a major studio backing it. Now, granted, they do not have their logo at the beginning or ending of the film, which again, you know, in terms
but they
of
did
the
put their
traditional-
ending on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, is that something without, you know, I mean, I suppose spoiling the film, are you aware of how the ending was molded by the studio? Because if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
this project was actually completed 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably shot it in '06 and it was all done in '07 and showed at festivals. And I think that, you know, not to go too far off topic, I think that relates to an audience's expectations as well because you've got this film that was under $15,000 to make. Actors didn't get paid anything. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see whether there's a lawsuit, as often happens in these kinds of situations. Hopefully the actors had good contracts, unlike the actors of Crash and other things that have ended up in court.